Cyber war is a term that's often coined these days. But what does it actually mean? NATO Review talks to an expert who claims that cyber war doesn't even exist and that the term is being misused.
If something happens, it can be a conventional act of violence. Whether we call it an act of war, whether I call it an act of war doesn't really matter. I'm just an academic. What matters is if prime ministers and presidents call it an act of war. And whether they do so or not is an eminently political decision. Think of the aftermath in Boston, of the Boston terrorist attacks.
But how does this fit with the crippling cyber attack on Estonia in 2007?
A country like Estonia certainly wasn't brought to its knees by a denial of service attack. If it actually would have been brought to its knees, then the president of Estonia wouldn't have written in the New York Times that it actually was a blessing in retrospect, because Estonia learned some interesting lessons from it, and it certainly did.
So what is the difference between a cyber attack and a conventional attack?
In the context of computer attacks, offensive capabilities don't necessarily translate into defensive capabilities. So being better at using offensive capabilities doesn't make you better on the defensive. So that's a sharp contrast to many conventional weapon systems.
So when would a cyber attack actually cross the threshold and become an act of war?
We've never seen an act of a computer attack that was violent first, that was political, in the sense that somebody said, I did this to you, and that was instrumental in the sense that somebody said, I did this to you to change your behavior. Because usually people don't take credit. States don't take credit for cyber attacks. I think we have an empirical record to talk about. It's mostly espionage, computer crime, a little bit of sabotage, and of course activism, subversion. We haven't seen something that is an act of the use of force through computer code. So why don't we talk about the real problems that we actually have and how we can solve them, as opposed to talking about what could happen possibly in the future and how we would call that if it actually happens.
Is there then a danger of exaggerating the effect of cyber attacks?
We are still human beings, and despite of Facebook, we still exist in a physical arena. It's like online dating. At the end of the day, what counts is not what happens online, but offline. And of course, if we talk about violence here, the same is very true.